Madame Aliner, regarding your previous proposal, I agree. Serafina Thorne stood on the balcony, her body chilled to the bone by the biting wind and night dew. On the other end of the line, Aliner Sterling sounded surprised. After a brief pause, she said, "It's for the best that you've come to your senses." She added coldly, "You aren't the kind of woman who can stand by Ethan's side. Leaving him is better for everyone. I will arrange a suitable marriage for you." "There is no need for you to arrange anyone. I already have someone in mind," Serafina said softly. "Give me 1 month. I will settle everything and leave the city for good." After hanging up, Serafina lowered her eyelashes and a single tear fell. 10 years, it had all been a beautiful, fleeting dream. In truth, she should have woken up the moment Vivian Ashford returned to the country. 2 weeks ago, Vivian returned following her mother's passing. Ethan Sterling had accompanied her throughout the funeral, and afterward, he took her to a mountain retreat. He turned off his phone, vanishing without a trace. On the 3rd day of their absence, Serafina received a message from an unknown number. One was a photo of a nude oil painting of Vivian, the other was an audio clip of a man's heavy breathing. Serafina knew that voice all too well. It was Ethan's. She had always been obsessed with Ethan's presence in bed. He wasn't forceful, but possessed a fragile, restrained vulnerability. Once, in the heat of passion, she had whispered against his neck, "What should I do? I love the way you sound, as if I'm hurting you. Am I a bit of a deviant?" Ethan had laughed, joking that he would record it and set it as her ringtone. It was a joke, of course. Serafina never imagined that one day she would actually have that audio on her phone, sent by someone else. From that moment on, that sound became her nightmare. A vivid, waking nightmare. In her dreams, a naked Vivian and Ethan were entwined in his art studio, lost in each other. Serafina would wake up gasping, drenched in a cold sweat. "Sira, I'm back from the mountains. There's a lot of work piled up at the office, so I won't be back for dinner. Make sure you eat well," Ethan said over the phone. He didn't mention a word about where he had been during those missing days. Serafina bit her lip and looked at the invitation on the dining table. It was for Vivian Ashford's homecoming gala. Whether by coincidence or design, the date was set for Ethan's birthday. Serafina hadn't intended to go, but after Ethan's call, she changed her mind. That evening, Serafina took a car to the hotel. A waiter led her to the 2nd floor. Through the glass doors, Serafina saw Vivian Ashford in the center of the hall, radiant in a red off-the-shoulder gown, surrounded by a crowd. Ethan stood beside her. Someone said something funny, and Vivian leaned into Ethan's arm, laughing uncontrollably. Ethan turned to look at her with a helpless, fond smile. Their eyes met, locked in a gaze that seemed filled with honey. Serafina had always known that Vivian was the white moonlight, in Ethan's heart the permanent scar on his soul. But after all these years, she thought, "Sira," Ethan noticed her and froze for a second. He quickly walked over. "What are you doing here?" Serafina produced the invitation. "The invitation," Ethan smiled. "What a coincidence. Vivian called after I finished my overtime and asked me to stop by her party. I figured you wouldn't like this kind of scene, so I didn't ask you. I didn't expect her to invite you herself." "Come in," Ethan took Serafina's hand. "Why are you so cold?" He wrapped his warm palm around hers and said, "I'll have someone bring you a shawl." Serafina looked at him. Over the years, he had always been this gentle and considerate, as if he had never changed. Ethan led her toward the group. These were all people from Ethan's social circle. Even if Serafina wasn't close to them, she recognized them. Only Vivian was a new face. Ethan introduced her. "Vive, this is my fiancé, Serafina." His tone was natural as he interlaced his fingers with Serafina's in an intimate gesture. "I've heard so much about you." Vivian crossed her arms and smiled at Serafina. "The charity case the Sterlings took in from the countryside, right?" The air in the room went still. Everyone present knew Serafina's background, but they also knew how much Ethan had treasured her over the years. No one had ever dared to belittle Serafina in front of him. Just as Ethan's expression darkened, Vivian suddenly giggled and affectionately put an arm around Serafina's shoulder. "Just a joke, don't take it to heart. I'm taking Serafina to get something to eat." "Excuse us," Vivian said, pushing Serafina toward the terrace before anyone could object. Once they were away from the crowd, Vivian let out a scoff. "Did you like the gift I sent you?" She curved her red lips into a seductive smile. "Those 2 messages." They were from you, Serafina said, looking her in the eye. Vivian's smile deepened. That day at the retreat, right in front of the altar. The more forbidden it is, the more exciting it gets. No man can resist that kind of thrill. Serafina's breathing quickened, her spine stiffening. The nightmare was closing in again. People were walking by outside, and monks were chanting. I didn't realize Ethan tasted so good. His fingers are so nimble, and his voice. Enough, Serafina grabbed a wine glass and splashed the contents in her face. The red liquid dripped down Vivian's chin. Vivian laughed, looking past Serafina's shoulder at someone behind her. Serafina turned abruptly. Not far away, Ethan stood behind the glass door of the terrace, his brow furrowed, staring intently at them. Vivian was the first to leave the terrace. Serafina saw her throw herself into Ethan's arms, only for Ethan to push her away. Vivian's eyes were red as she said something to him. Inside the hall, the band's music drowned out their argument, but friends from their circle began to notice the tension and gathered around. A man patted Ethan's shoulder as if trying to mediate, but Ethan shook his hand off. Finally, Ethan stormed away from the group and came out to the balcony. Ethan didn't have a great temper, but usually he was too lethargic to actually get angry. Let's go. Ethan grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the exit. As they reached the doors, someone tried to intervene. Serafina, you should just apologize to Vive. Why ruin the mood over something so small? Get lost. Ethan didn't even look back. They got into the car. It wasn't until they had driven a distance that Ethan finally calmed down. He reached out one hand to grasp Serafina's cold fingers. Sera, I know you wouldn't get angry for no reason. She must have done something terrible. You don't need to apologize. Did she do something terrible to me, or was it you and her? Serafina asked softly. A large truck nearby honked its horn sharply, making her ears ring. Ethan frowned as he turned the steering wheel, glancing at her. Serafina's lips trembled. Suddenly, she felt drained of all strength. The words were stuck in her throat, and she couldn't bring herself to ask a second time. Ethan's phone rang. The screen displayed Vive. He frowned and didn't answer. After the call ended, a message popped up on the screen. It was a photo from Vivian. Ethan glanced at it, and his face instantly turned pale. In the photo, Vivian was sitting on the edge of the hotel's 21st floor rooftop, her feet dangling in the air, her long curly hair messy in the wind. The phone rang again. Ethan hit answer. Vivian's voice came through the car's Bluetooth speakers, accompanied by the howling wind. Ethan, I need to see you right now. If you aren't in front of me within 10 minutes, I'm jumping. The call cut off. The car was silent for 2 seconds. That lunatic, Ethan cursed, his hands gripping the steering wheel so hard the veins bulged. The car performed a violent U-turn. Ethan floored the accelerator, racing back toward the hotel. She's actually capable of doing it, he hissed through gritted teeth. When they arrived, Ethan completely forgot Serafina was in the passenger seat. He shoved the door open and sprinted for the elevator. Against the night sky, Vivian stood on the edge of the roof, her arms spread wide. Her red dress looked like a flame, and her eyes were filled with tears as she looked at him. Ethan, don't you want me anymore? Without a second thought, Ethan vaulted over the safety railing and pulled her into a tight embrace. When Serafina finally caught up, that was the scene she witnessed. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed as fireworks shot into the sky. A group of people jumped out from the shadows, shouting, "Surprise!" Someone was recording the pair with a video camera, and others were checking stopwatches. Wow, 9 minutes and 58 seconds. Ethan is so punctual, realizing he'd been played. Ethan pushed Vivian away, his eyes red with fury. Are you insane? Vivian laughed and grabbed Ethan's collar, pulling him down for a kiss on the lips. Happy birthday! Ethan stood frozen. Amidst the cheers of the crowd, a birthday song began to play. Waiters wheeled out champagne and a 3-tier birthday cake. Vivian nudged Ethan to blow out the candles, and they cut the cake together. Fireworks filled the sky. Laughter was everywhere. In an unobserved corner, Serafina quietly turned and walked away. Ethan didn't come home that night. Serafina threw the birthday cake she had baked by hand into the trash. On the table sat the birthday gift she had prepared for him, a new work by his favorite painter. She had spent 6 months persuading the artist to sell it to her. She had been looking forward to seeing the joy on his face when he saw it. Her phone rang. The name Aliner flashed on the screen. After a moment of hesitation, Serafina answered. Madame Aliner, where is Ethan? Aliner asked immediately. Why isn't he answering his phone? He's celebrating his birthday with friends. Tell him I called to wish him a happy birthday. And, Aliner commanded impatiently, watch over him. Don't let people force him to drink too much. It's nearly midnight in the city. Why is he still out? Aliner took it for granted that Serafina was with Ethan. After all, for the past decade, Serafina had spent every single birthday with him. But this year was an exception. Serafina didn't say much, simply agreeing and waiting for Aliner to hang up. Aliner was the one who had brought her into the Sterling household. She owed her, and she owed Ethan. After her parents died in an accident, she was forced to live with her uncle's family. Her aunt was cruel, and her uncle was a drunk who turned violent when he was in his cups. She was usually the one pushed forward to take the beatings. When she was 14, they tried to sell her to a 40-year-old bachelor in a neighboring village. In desperation, Serafina spent 2 days hiding in the cemetery, waiting for the lady of the Sterling family who was returning to her ancestral village to pay her respects. She knelt before the woman, holding out her perfect report cards, begging for sponsorship. She had heard that Madame Aliner was wealthy and charitable, sponsoring poor students every year. Serafina wanted that money to convince her uncle to let her keep studying. When she finished stuttering out her plea, Aliner remained silent. But the young man standing beside her, the one with the handsome, world-weary face and a permanent look of boredom, suddenly spoke. Since you love charity so much, why don't you just adopt her? Serafina later learned that the 18-year-old Ethan Sterling was suffering from severe depression at the time. That sentence was the only thing he had volunteered to say in months. And so, Aliner quickly handled the paperwork and brought Serafina home that winter. Make sure you talk to Ethan often, do you understand? Aliner had instructed her. Serafina had asked for a scholarship but ended up as the Sterling's ward. Her phone vibrated. Serafina looked down, expecting more instructions from Aliner. Instead, it was 3 photos from Vivian. One was a close-up of a hand, slender fingers, well-defined knuckles, clean and rounded nails. It was Ethan's hand. Serafina knew it perfectly. The lighting in the photo was dim, but upon closer inspection, she could see that the hand was resting on a black lace bra. The second was a photo of Ethan's jawline. On his open collar, a bright red lipstick mark was visible on his throat. The final photo was a selfie of Vivian, smiling directly into the camera. Her neck was covered in clear, intimate marks. "Is he like this with you?" "I can hardly take it," the caption read. Serafina stared at the phone until the screen went black. She realized her entire body was shaking violently. The next day, when Ethan returned, Serafina was in the bathroom. He hugged her from behind, his voice full of apology. "Sira, I'm so sorry. They made me drink too much yesterday. I wanted to come home early to spend my birthday with you." He leaned in to kiss her, but she turned her head away. Ethan smelled clean, like he'd just showered, but the thought of why he might have showered made Serafina feel sick with grief. Ethan paused, then looked into the mirror to see Serafina's face. He noticed a deep crack in the glass, with dried blood still caught in the crevices. His expression shifted instantly. "Sira, what happened?" Serafina looked up, her voice flat. "Nothing. I accidentally hit it while cleaning." "How do you accidentally hit the very center of a mirror?" Ethan hissed, grabbing her hand and seeing the thick bandage wrapped around her palm. "It's fine. I've already taken care of it." Serafina pulled her hand back. She didn't want to talk about how she had lost control and punched the mirror last night. Ethan wouldn't let it go. He grabbed her arm. "We're going to the hospital," Serafina pulled away. "I told you, I've handled it. My bandaging skills are excellent. I've bandaged you so many times over the years. You should know that better than anyone." The words slipped out, leaving both of them in a stunned silence. That was a dark, somber period in Ethan's life, a place neither of them had touched in years. Back then, Ethan's depression had been so severe that he frequently self-harmed. He refused to go to the hospital and wouldn't let the family doctor touch him. Only Serafina was allowed near him. She had treated his wounds so many times that she was as skilled as a nurse. She had witnessed all his moments of weakness and saw how hard he fought to come back from the brink. Those were the days of mutual dependence that only the two of them understood. "I'm sorry," Serafina said, taking a deep breath. She didn't want to tear open his old scars. Ethan pressed her head against his chest. Sierra, if there's a problem, let me solve it, okay? Serafina gave a bitter smile. The person solving the problem was the problem itself. How could it be solved? When Vivian went abroad years ago, Ethan had become ill with grief. Serafina was merely a placebo, and now the real cure had returned. Seeing that Serafina wasn't speaking, Ethan pulled her along. Come on, I want to show you something. Ethan drove her out. They arrived at a detached villa on the west side of the city. Serafina knew this was where Ethan kept his private art collection. He didn't usually let anyone in. He even did the cleaning and maintenance himself. It was his secret base. This way. Ethan seemed a bit excited. He led Serafina through the small garden and into the house. The 3 stories were devoid of furniture, filled instead with various art pieces and paintings on the walls. I saw the gift you got me. I love it, Sierra. Ethan kissed her forehead and personally hung the painting she had left on the table the night before in a central spot. Then, he took her hand and led her to the basement elevator. Close your eyes. I have a surprise for you. Serafina obeyed. The elevator chimed, and Ethan led her out. Serafina felt like she was standing in a vast, empty space. With a click, Ethan turned on the overhead lights. Serafina opened her eyes, squinting at the sudden brightness. Ethan dropped to one knee in front of her, holding her hand, his eyes filled with tenderness. It's not fully decorated yet, but I can't wait any longer. Ethan pulled a diamond ring from his pocket. Sierra, I still owe you a formal proposal. I want to do it here. He gently slid the ring onto her finger. Will you marry me? Serafina didn't speak or move. From the moment her vision cleared, her head began to throb. This was his art studio. This studio was the setting of the nude painting Vivian had sent her. It was the setting of her nightmare. To Serafina, it felt like the nightmare was becoming a reality. She knew he was proposing, but her mind was filled with images of Ethan and Vivian entwined on the floor of this very room. Ethan asked after receiving no answer. He felt her hand turn ice cold. Why are you so pale? He stood up in a panic to support her. Serafina turned and ran. She felt like she would suffocate if she stayed a second longer. She burst out of the villa and leaned against the railing, gasping for air. Ethan followed her out, his face full of concern. Sierra, what's wrong? Where does it hurt? We're going to the hospital. On the way back, Serafina refused the hospital. Ethan called the family doctor, who suggested it might have been a lack of oxygen from the unventilated basement. Ethan finally relaxed a little. The doctor says you need rest. Relax and don't put too much pressure on yourself, Ethan said. Back home, Ethan insisted on carrying her upstairs and tucking her into bed. He skipped work to stay by her side all day. That evening, he patiently coaxed her to sleep. In the middle of the night, Ethan's phone on the nightstand vibrated. He picked it up and quickly silenced it. A moment later, messages began to flood in. Ethan rolled over in bed, clearly agitated. 10 minutes later, he got up, checked on the sleeping Serafina, put on his coat, and left. The moment the door closed, Serafina opened her eyes. She got up and walked barefoot to the balcony. Parked not far away was a Ferrari. Vivian, in her red dress, was striking even in the darkness. As soon as Ethan approached, she threw herself at him, grabbing his collar to kiss him. Ethan seemed to curse at her and pushed her away. Vivian pressed closer, hooking her arms around his neck again, standing on her tiptoes to reach his lips. She tried over and over. Suddenly, Ethan pushed her back against the car door with near brutal force, gripped her chin, and kissed her. They were a match for each other, locked in a fierce embrace. In the midst of it, Vivian reached for Ethan's belt. Ethan twisted both her arms above her head, yanked the car door open, shoved her inside, and climbed in after her. The car drove off. Serafina sat down on the wicker chair on the balcony, her blood turning cold. After a long time, she picked up her phone and dialed a number. It was answered quickly. Elinor sounded annoyed. Why are you calling at this hour? Did something happen to Ethan? Regarding your previous proposal, I agree, Serafina said softly. The 10-year bond was finally broken. The Ferrari sped down the empty midnight streets. Ethan's zipper was down. Vivian reached over to touch him, but Ethan slammed on the brakes and shoved her hand away. Haven't you had enough? Vivian licked the blood from her bitten lip and laughed. I like this rough version of you much better than the good boy from 10 years ago. But I still miss your innocent, virgin self. Just a touch of my finger and you would. She moved her hand again. Ethan hissed, "You played me once 10 years ago and then ran away to London. Vivian, you really are something else. So let me make it up to you now. Didn't I make you feel good on your birthday?" Vivian giggled. "I didn't realize you'd become so conservative as you got older. At the finish line, you'd rather go to the bathroom and handle it yourself than let me help. Are you staying chaste for Serafina? Ha ha ha." Ethan's face went cold. "Vivian, there's a limit if you dare bring this to Serafina. Have you ever considered that she might already know?" The car screeched to a halt. Vivian, unprepared, hit her head on the windshield. The car sat in the middle of the road. Ethan's gaze was as sharp as a knife. Vivian stared at him for a long time, her eyes reddening. "Serafina is so lucky. Even with her background, the Sterlings accepted her. When my father was still alive and our family was just starting to struggle, your mother decided I wasn't good enough for you and shipped me off to England." Ethan looked surprised. "You don't believe me?" Vivian raised an eyebrow. She didn't say it outright, of course, but she gave the Ashford family such a good deal that I had to leave. Vivian sighed. "Ethan, do you really think I have no heart? I've kept that painting you did for me all these years. I look at it whenever I miss you. I remember the obsessed look in your eyes when you were painting me and how it looked when I held it." Ethan pulled her hand away and let out a long breath. "Vivian, it's been 10 years and I still can't tell when you're lying. Go back to London. I'll make sure you're set for life." Vivian smirked, her expression unreadable. "Are you throwing me out? Whoa, are you trying to make the rest of us look bad, Fina? What time is it?" Julian Rivers pushed open the lab door, shouting. Serafina looked at him through a glass test tube and set it in the sink. "If you have nothing to do, wash the tubes." Julian saw the pile of glassware and raised his eyebrows. "Were you here all night?" When Serafina didn't answer, Julian walked over to the sink and started scrubbing. "We're the same age, but I have to call you senior. Did you skip 2 grades? How are you so brilliant?" "I'm not brilliant. I just study hard," Serafina said flatly. Since she was 14, her life had revolved around 2 things: studying and taking care of Ethan. She had fought with everything she had to do those 2 things well, as if they were her entire purpose. "Sira, help me out," Serafina paused and turned around. Julian, his hands covered in suds, held up an arm and gave her his trademark sunny, handsome smile. "Could you roll up my sleeve for me? You can call me Serafina if you don't want to call me senior," Serafina said expressionlessly, walking over to tuck his drooping sleeve back. Julian smiled innocently. "I think Fina sounds more friendly." "You don't like it?" Serafina was a distant person. Everyone called her by her full name except for Ethan, who called her Sira or Fina. Serafina felt a tightness in her chest. She took off her white lab coat, threw it on a chair, and went out for breakfast. As she pushed open the lab door, a girl holding a gift box stood there, blushing. "Excuse me, is Julian in there?" Serafina knocked on the doorframe to get Julian's attention and walked away. Julian walked over, his handsome face still wearing a smile. He listened to the confession with a hint of distraction, his eyes following Serafina's back until she disappeared. Serafina received a call from Ethan as she was leaving the academic building. "Sira, I bought those pastries you like. You weren't home, did you go to school this early?" Ethan's voice was tentative. "I had a nightmare and couldn't sleep, so I came to the lab." "What was the dream? Were you scared?" Ethan's worry was palpable. "It was disgusting." Ethan fell silent for a moment, then said guiltily, "I'm sorry I wasn't there for you. Last night, I suddenly had some inspiration and went to the studio." Serafina smirked. "You haven't painted in years." Since the year Vivian left, he had stopped painting. Serafina knew Ethan had a large studio filled with sealed-away paintings, and she knew from old magazines that he had been a child prodigy. But since she had arrived at the Sterling house, she had never seen him pick up a brush. The only painting of his she had ever seen was the one Vivian had sent her, the one with Ethan's signature in the corner. Ethan fumbled for words. "Senior, I came in early to help you, and now my arms are sore. Shouldn't you buy me breakfast?" Julian said, draped an arm over Serafina's shoulder from behind, then quickly pulled it back into his pocket when she turned around. "Who is that? A classmate?" Ethan's voice turned sharp. Serafina found it ironic. When she first started university, Ethan visited her constantly. Any guy who got close to her was given a stern warning from a protective brother figure. Back then, she had protested, but secretly she was happy. But now, After what he did with Vivian, what right did he have to care who was around her? Serafina's tone turned mocking. An exchange student, a junior in my project group. His name is Julian, he's 6'1". Sierra, I didn't mean to control you, Ethan interrupted quickly. He paused. Eat well, I'll pick you up from school tonight. After she hung up, Julian looked at her with a smile. How did you know I'm 6'1", Fina? Serafina gave him a cold look. Because the guy on the phone is the same height. I'm young, I'm still growing, Julian straightened his back. Growing for what? To reach the clouds? Serafina left him behind. That evening, Ethan did pick Serafina up. They went to her favorite restaurant and then to a movie. Over the last 2 years, since Ethan had taken over the Sterling Group, he had been busy day and night. Serafina was also buried in her thesis and lab work under a strict mentor. They rarely had time for leisure. Ethan had arranged everything perfectly, focusing entirely on Serafina, but she noticed that every time his back was turned, he was checking his phone. Finally, halfway through the movie, when Ethan tilted his phone to reply to another message, Serafina lost her patience. She stood up. My head hurts, I want to go. Ethan panicked. He drove her home and called the family doctor. The doctor found nothing wrong and simply told her to rest and avoid stress. As Ethan walked the doctor out, Serafina caught a glimpse of a message on his phone on the table. Are you sure you aren't coming? You'll regret it. Then, a photo arrived, Vivian holding a whip, looking back with a smile. She was wearing nothing but a pair of long black boots. A moment later, Ethan rushed back in. He looked relieved when he found his phone. Sierra, there's an emergency at the office I need to handle. He walked to the bedside with a glass of milk. Don't go, please. Serafina looked into his eyes. Ethan avoided her gaze. Serafina smiled and turned her back to him. I was just joking. I'm going to sleep. Do as you wish. After a moment, she heard the sound of the glass being set on the nightstand, and Ethan quietly slipped out. In the middle of the night, the phone vibrated. Vivian had sent a photo. On a snow-white back, there were pink whip marks. Ethan is full of surprises, the caption read. Then came a video. In the empty studio, a woman moaned with her lips parted as a man pressed against her, the familiar dark tattoo on his back moving with his muscles. Serafina threw the phone aside and buried her head in her arms. The next day, Serafina went to see Professor Miller and told him she was withdrawing from the project. The professor was furious. You are the most promising student in this group, and now. I am so disappointed. Serafina gave him a deep bow. As she left the office, she couldn't stop the tears. She had studied so hard, given everything to get to this point, and now she was walking away. How could she not care? That evening, Serafina went to the old Sterling estate to see Alina, who had just returned from Europe. 3 years after Serafina joined the family, Alina had divorced Arthur Sterling and moved abroad. The old house had been empty ever since. Over the years, Alina had only returned once when she found out Serafina and Ethan were together. Serafina remembered that day in this very room. Alina had screamed at her, calling her ungrateful and delusional, demanding to know how she dared to seduce Ethan, telling her to get out. At the height of her fury, Alina had raised her hand to strike Serafina, but Ethan stepped in and took the blow. Alina had used all her strength. Ethan's face had bruised instantly. Alina had stood there, shocked. Ethan had told her, word for word, Sierra is my life. If you want to take my life, then make her leave. Serafina's nose stung. She pinched her palm to stop herself from looking back. Alina was still cold toward her. She led Serafina to the study and laid out documents for her to sign. I can give you the name and the status, but don't think about my money. When I die, it all goes to Ethan. Serafina had never wanted Alina's money. She skimmed the papers and signed her name. You said you had your own choice for a husband. Who is he? Alina asked. Just as Serafina was about to speak, the study door was flung open. Ethan burst in like a whirlwind. What are you doing with Sierra? Ethan pulled Serafina behind him and glared at Alina. The first thing you say to your mother is that? Alina was fuming. Ethan's eyes fell on the documents. What is this? What did you make her sign? Serafina's heart hammered. Alina calmly pushed the papers toward him. I gave her a house. Ethan saw the top page. It was indeed a deed for a villa. He was still suspicious. I'll give her a house. Everything I have is hers, Ethan said. Alina sneered. Do you think what you have is actually yours? Arthur Sterling is still lying in that hospital bed, half dead. You'd better pray he lives a while longer. Who knows what he left for that bastard of his in his will. Ethan, you don't truly control the Sterling Group yet. Remember that? We'll talk about this later. Ethan frowned and pulled Serafina away. Let's go. After a few steps, he turned back to Aliner. How long are you staying? Sierra and I are getting married next month. Aliner gave a cold snort. Ethan glanced at the stack of papers again. He felt an uneasy premonition. Serafina tugged his hand. Let's go. There would be no wedding. At the bottom of that stack was the document where Aliner officially adopted her. Serafina had been a ward, but now she was legally Aliner's daughter. She was Ethan's sister in the eyes of the law. They could never marry. They were now family on paper, but in reality, she had cut the cord. Serafina smiled slightly, though her eyes were misty. Did she give you a hard time? I only heard she was back this afternoon, Ethan said. No, Sierra, don't worry, I'm here. Ethan gripped her hand tightly. In the close confines of the car, Serafina smelled a strange perfume on him. He must have left in a hurry. He hadn't noticed the faint smudge of lipstick on his collar. Serafina looked out the window. Take me to the university. I'm staying in the dorms for a while. Why is your work so busy lately? Ethan frowned. Is the professor being too hard on you? He rubbed the ring on her finger. You've lost weight. The ring is loose. Serafina turned to him. I'm not as busy as you. You've been working late every single night. Ethan's eyes flickered. The company. There are things I need to finish so I can take time off for our honeymoon. Serafina didn't say another word. They drove in silence. When they reached the campus gates, Serafina got out. Ethan wanted to walk her in, but his phone on the console vibrated. Serafina saw Vivian's name. She shut the door without a word. Ethan silenced the phone and followed her out, pulling her into a tight hug. Vivian is going back to London soon. She just wanted to have a farewell gathering with everyone. Okay, I understand, Serafina nodded. She isn't coming back. Ethan didn't know why he felt the need to add that. As Serafina turned to leave, he felt a sudden, inexplicable surge of panic. Okay, Serafina repeated. Sierra, give me a hug. Ethan pleaded. Serafina reached out and hugged him tightly, then looked into his eyes. Goodbye, Ethan. After Ethan left, Serafina went to a tattoo parlor in an alley near the school. She took off her jacket, revealing the tattoo along her spine. Remove it, please. The tattoo was long a sun totem designed by Ethan. He had said Serafina was the sun in his life. Back then, she had felt the same. He was the rare light in her bleak existence. They had gotten matching tattoos. Removing it hurt much more than getting it, but Serafina found a masochistic pleasure in the pain. For the next 10 days, they didn't see each other. Serafina finished organizing her research and handed it over to the professor. Then, Aliner hosted a small gala at a private club. There weren't many guests, but they were all prominent figures in the city's high society. At the gala, Aliner publicly announced Serafina's status as her adopted daughter. At the same time, it was Serafina's engagement party. The man standing beside her was Julian Rivers. The crowd offered their congratulations, and on the surface, everything was festive and harmonious. In a private moment, Aliner asked, "Who is this fiancé of yours?" "Not from the city. I met him at school." "He's an exchange student," Serafina said. Aliner said, "I couldn't reach Ethan, otherwise he should have been here as your brother." But they both knew it was better he didn't come. If he had, there was no telling what kind of scene he would have caused. That night, Ethan woke up in a daze. Vivian had spiked his drink the day before, and things had been wild. He had told Vivian this was the last time, that after this, they were done and she would go back to London. Then he had blacked out and slept until now. His phone had died at some point. Ethan plugged it in, trying to figure out how to explain his disappearance to Serafina. They hadn't spoken much lately. He just needed a little more time to send Vivian away, and everything would go back to normal. Serafina would marry him, and they would be just like before. His phone turned on. Before he could even open his chat with Serafina, a flood of notifications came in. As he skimmed them, Ethan's face went pale. As the gala came to an end, the guests began to leave. Serafina said her goodbyes to Aliner. She was heading straight to the airport to leave the city. Madame Aliner, thank you for taking me away from that village all those years ago. Take care of yourself, Serafina said. Aliner nodded. Her eyes swept over Julian, feeling a strange sense of familiarity. As the two of them stepped into the elevator, Eleanor kept her eyes on Julian. Julian looked up and met Eleanor's gaze without flinching. He offered her a faint, knowing smirk. The elevator doors closed. Eleanor's mind kept replaying that smirk. Suddenly, she remembered something and made a quick call. Find out everything you can about a man named Julian Rivers. Fast! In the club's parking garage, Serafina waited with her suitcase for Julian to bring the car around. Suddenly, a black sedan screeched to a halt in front of her. Ethan jumped out. Sierra, what is this? Why did my mother announce you're her adopted daughter? Why were you there? Do you realize what this means? Ethan's voice was a mix of anger and hurt. It means we are brother and sister, Serafina said calmly. And this ridiculous engagement, how did she force you into it? Why didn't you tell me? Ethan demanded. Where was I supposed to tell you? At your studio? Ethan went silent. Then his eyes landed on her suitcase. His eyes were red, his voice cracking. Where are you going? We're supposed to get married next month. Sierra, where are you going to leave me? When she didn't answer, he tried to pull her away. Serafina struggled. In the scuffle, her back hit the wall and she let out a cry of pain. Ethan let go immediately, panic-stricken. Where did I hit you? He checked her head and shoulders. When he pulled her collar aside and saw that her back was a raw, bloody mess, Ethan turned white. Sierra, where is your tattoo? There is no wedding, Ethan. We are done. I never want to see you again. Serafina looked up, her eyes cold as ice. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. His heart felt like it was being crushed and his vision blurred. He reached for her left hand. The middle finger, where he had placed the ring, was empty. It finally dawned on him that things had been wrong since the day of the proposal. Someone shoved his shoulder hard. Julian stepped in front of Serafina, his eyes scanning Ethan's face. We're running late. Let's go, fiancé. Julian emphasized the last word. Julian tried to lead her away, but Ethan shoved him back against the wall. Ethan looked at their interlaced fingers, a flash of violence in his eyes. He raised a fist toward Julian. Ethan, Serafina stepped out and looked him in the eye. She opened her phone and played the video Vivian had sent her. Ethan's face turned deathly pale. Serafina pulled her jacket off her shoulder, showing him her back. You asked where the tattoo is. I saw that tattoo moving on Vivian's body. The thought of having the same thing on me. It makes me sick. The mere thought of sharing a mark with you is repulsive. How do you expect me to look at you? Every word was like a knife. Ethan stood frozen, trembling. Serafina gave him one last look. Just leave me alone. She pushed past him and got into the car. They sped off toward the airport. The plane ascended. Serafina huddled in her seat, staring blankly out the dark window. Julian walked over, concerned. Fina, are you cold? I'll get another blanket. The act is over. You don't have to keep playing, Serafina said coldly. Julian ran a hand through her hair. If you're feeling down, you can talk to me. I'm a good listener. Serafina finally turned to look at him. You only got close to me because I was Ethan's fiancé, didn't you? You've achieved your goal. We don't need to pretend anymore. Julian's hand paused. I don't care if your name is Rivers or Sterling. I don't care if you're doing this for revenge or just to spite Ethan. He and I are nothing to each other now. You don't need to waste your energy on me. After a long silence, Julian smiled. How did you know? Who I am? I'm not the type of person who naturally attracts attention. A guy like you wouldn't spend so much time around me for no reason. In the lab, your wallet fell out. I saw the photo of you and your mother when you were a kid. I happened to see a photo of your mother once at the Sterling house. I have a very good memory. I see. Julian raised an eyebrow. I told you that you were brilliant. After a moment, he added, how does the Sterling family describe me and my mother, the mistress and the bastard? Serafina remained silent. In Eleanor's words, he was that mongrel. Julian seemed to guess as much and gave a nonchalant smile. But you were wrong about one thing, Fina. You are attractive. I'm finding you more interesting by the minute. Serafina turned her head away, ignoring his flirting. So, Fina, why did you let me get close to you in the end? Serafina had met Julian outside the tattoo parlor that day. She had offered him a deal. He would act as her fiancé at Eleanor's gala. Julian had smiled and said nothing. Just as Serafina thought he was refusing, he grabbed her hand, and the oversized diamond ring slid into his palm. He said a ring that didn't fit shouldn't be worn, and threw the massive diamond away. They had a deal. I didn't want the marriage Eleanor was arranging. I needed a shield, and I didn't want Ethan to find me. As Arthur Sterling's secret second son, someone Alina has spent years trying and failing to find, I knew you could hide me from the Sterlings forever. You said it yourself, you aren't his fiancé anymore. You have no more use to me. Why should I help you? Because you threw away my ring. That ring was worth $12 million. Julian burst out laughing. I'm starting to think you set me up to throw that ring away. For the rest of the 10-hour flight, they didn't say another word. Serafina's back was in pain, and she drifted in and out of sleep. Julian sat in silence, lost in thought. When the plane finally landed, Serafina couldn't even open her eyes. Fina, Julian shook her gently. You have a fever. Once we clear customs, I'm taking you to a hospital. Serafina was sick for an entire month. The wound on her back became infected, leading to recurring fevers, dizziness, and an inability to eat. In just 1 month, she became painfully thin. Eventually, Julian found a psychiatrist for her. Do you love him that much? He asked, watching her. After you left Ethan? Don't tell me. Serafina stared into the empty air. A month later, Serafina was discharged. Julian took her on a boat to a small island. The island wasn't large, with only a dozen or so families. Julian led her to a small house with a red roof. Now, you're my tenant. That night, Serafina couldn't sleep. She heard a noise downstairs. She went down and found Julian drinking in the living room, surrounded by bottles. He looked quite drunk. Not asleep, Julian looked up. Want a drink? It's my birthday, I'm buying. Happy birthday, Serafina said. That's it, no gift. Do you want me to sing? Serafina said flatly. Is that some kind of humanitarian aid? Julian waved a hand. Never mind, don't. Serafina eventually sat down and had a drink with him. I never imagined my birth was such a curse, Julian said. My mother killed herself on my 15th birthday. Julian was drunk and in a talkative mood. My maternal family was reasonably well off. This island belonged to my grandfather. My mother was from a good home, raised with love. She met Arthur Sterling while studying in Singapore. He seduced her. They were together for 3 years before she found out he had a wife and a son. But she was already pregnant with me. She was a romantic fool. She believed his lies about loving her and insisted on having me. The father I remember would come to visit us for 1 month every year. He was wonderful to both of us. I used to think I loved him. Julian scoffed. Then his wife found out about us, and Arthur never came back. That was when I found out the truth that I was a damn bastard. I told my mom it didn't matter, that I'd protect her and we'd live our own lives. But Alina wouldn't leave her alone. She did things to keep triggering her. On my 15th birthday, my mother spent the day with me and then took her own life that night. I went to see Arthur in the city this year. He's like a living ghost in that hospital bed. Someone gave me a letter. Arthur wrote that the reason he stayed away was to protect us. He said he'd left a will, and when he dies, his estate will be split between me and his eldest son, Ethan. He also said my mother was the love of his life, the only woman he ever loved. What a joke. Serafina listened quietly without saying a word. Julian eventually became incoherent. He dropped his glass and curled up on the sofa, falling asleep. The next morning, Julian was back to his usual sunny, charming self. He didn't mention a word about the night before, and Serafina acted as if she hadn't heard his dark past. Julian took her fishing, but they didn't catch anything. Serafina slipped and fell into the water. The climate on the island was warm, and the water was pleasant. Serafina decided to just swim. Floating on her back, looking at the brilliant blue sky and the bright sun, the shadows of the city seemed to be fading away. Serafina lived a simple life on the island. As her mood stabilized, she began applying to schools. She looked into PhD programs at several inland universities. One day, while researching a topic, she hit a wall. She decided to call her old mentor for advice. Serafina pulled out the phone she hadn't used in ages to find the professor's number. As soon as she plugged it in and turned it on, the phone vibrated so much she thought it might explode. Hundreds of messages flooded in, all from Ethan. Serafina's heart raced. She wanted to throw the phone aside, but a call came in right then. Her finger accidentally swiped, and the call connected. After 6 months, Ethan's voice came through the receiver. "Sierra, where are you?" Serafina went to hang up, but then she heard him say, "Don't cry, don't be afraid. I'm coming to get you. They don't deserve to be your family. I'll be your family from now on." Serafina froze. Ethan was drunk. He was mumbling to himself, talking about things that happened when she was 18. That was the year she graduated high school and got into a top university. Her uncle's family, whom she hadn't heard from in years, called and invited her back for New Year's. Her uncle said he'd seen her interview on TV and knew she'd ranked first in the city. He said her mother would have been proud. Serafina's heart softened. They were her only blood relatives. So she went back to her old village for the holiday. At first, they were polite because of the gifts she brought. But once her aunt realized Serafina wouldn't give them her scholarship money, the mask slipped. "You're a high and mighty sterling now. Do you really care about a few $1,000s? You say it's for tuition? The sterlings can't afford your tuition. Serafina, you're heartless. You've found a wealthy life and left us here to suffer." Her uncle defended her at first. But on New Year's Eve, he got drunk and became violent. He smashed things and called her a short-lived brat, just like her mother. Serafina was hit in the head. She ran out into the cold night. Ethan called her to ask how her new year was going. Back then, Ethan still saw her as a child. They weren't together yet. Serafina tried to keep her voice steady, saying, "Ethan, everything is fine." But Ethan heard the tremor in her voice. "Where are you? Why is it so windy?" he asked sternly. That night, Ethan drove 7 hours to the village and found her at her mother's grave. He pulled her up and said, "Sira, I'm here to take you home." She buried her face in his coat and sobbed. "Don't be afraid. I'll be your family." He stroked her hair. From that moment on, Ethan became her everything. But in the end, they had drifted apart. Serafina hung up and cried silently. Julian pushed open the door, his face grim. He grabbed Serafina's phone and threw it on the table. "Serafina, don't make me lose respect for you. If you're going to be a romantic fool like my mother, if you can't let go, then get the hell out of here. Don't die in front of me." He paused, then said, "I'm going back to the city tomorrow. If you really can't let go of Ethan, this is your chance to go back." Serafina wiped her tears. She didn't want to say that just now, the last lingering memory of Ethan had vanished. When Ethan had used his drunken voice to repeat those words from their youth, the man who had betrayed her collided with the pure memory of the boy she once knew. With a soft click, the memory shattered. The last bit of warmth she clung to was gone. "I'm not going back. Why are you going back to the city?" Serafina asked. Julian was silent for a long time before saying, "Arthur Sterling is dying." If Arthur died, it meant his will would be read and the Sterling group would be in chaos. People would have to pick sides, and others would try to take advantage. Whether the massive Sterling ship would find a new captain or tear itself apart, no one knew. Julian left the next morning. Serafina saw him off at the dock. "Who do you want to win, me or Ethan?" Serafina only said, "Be careful." Julian forced a light-hearted smile. "I thought you'd be hoping I wouldn't come back so you'd never have to pay rent again." 3 days after Julian left, Serafina was researching under her desk lamp when she heard a speedboat in the distance. The island nights were quiet. Any sound stood out. Serafina's heart jumped. She thought Julian was back. She didn't know if that was good or bad. She dropped her pen and ran to the shore. As the person stepped off the boat, their silhouette was tall and straight. "Julian," Serafina called out. The person straightened up and looked at her. The boat's spotlight hit them directly. Serafina stood frozen. After 2 seconds, she turned and ran. "Sira!" Ethan sprinted after her, grabbing her waist and pulling her into a tight embrace. Ethan was cold from the sea breeze, and his lips were cold as he pressed them against her hair and cheeks. Serafina couldn't break free. "Ethan, you bastard," she choked out. Ethan didn't speak, he just held her with a desperate grip. They fell onto the sand, and Ethan used his hand to cushion her head. He rolled on top of her, trying to kiss her lips. Ethan, suddenly, the memory of her bloody back and her calling him repulsive flashed through Ethan's mind. He stopped just before their lips touched. Serafina glared at him, her eyes filling with tears of anger. Ethan seemed to snap out of it. He sat up. A loud slap echoed as Serafina pulled her sweater together and hit him across the face. Ethan didn't flinch. He just watched her, his eyes filled with a starving longing. "Sira, I'm sorry." He reached out to wipe her tears, but his hand stopped mid-air. Ethan realized that when he was sober, he didn't dare touch her. He was terrified of seeing the disgust in her eyes. He had lost his mind for a moment. When he heard her call out that other man's name, he'd gone insane with jealousy. "Sira, you can hate me, but you can't be with Julian. He's using you. I've been so worried about you." Ethan didn't mention that the moment he found out Julian's identity, he had used every resource at his disposal to find her. "Shouldn't you be back in the city right now?" Serafina asked. Ethan was surprised she knew. But then, his heart sank further. If Julian's intimacy with Serafina at the garage was just a provocation, Ethan now realized it was deeper than that. Julian had told Serafina everything. That meant their relationship was much closer than he'd imagined. Ethan's heart twisted in pain. "I heard Arthur is not doing well." Serafina still didn't understand why Ethan would leave the city at a time like this. During her years at the Sterling house, she had only seen Arthur a few times. He was a stranger to her, and she didn't really care. But the Sterling family was massive. Right now, the city must be a whirlpool of hidden agendas. Julian went back to the city. "I found you by tracing his movements. I was afraid that if I didn't come now, you'd disappear again, and I'd never find you," Ethan said honestly. He knew that right now, countless eyes were on him. He shouldn't have moved, but the night he found out Julian's travel plans, he hadn't slept at all. The next morning, he had abandoned everything to come here. "Sira, come back with me. You can hate me, you don't even have to see me, but let me know you're safe. I can protect you in the city," Serafina scoffed. "Protect me? Do you know what's in your father's will?" Ethan was silent for a moment. "I wasn't sure before, but after Vivian came back, I found out. Her uncle is my father's lawyer." Vivian was a topic neither of them wanted to touch, but Ethan knew he had to explain. "After her mother's funeral, I stayed with her at the retreat to handle the services. I wanted her to get some information from her uncle. Later, when we were alone, she started talking about the past. I gave in to temptation. She used her hands." Ethan spoke with a sense of deep shame. Seeing Serafina staring blankly at the sea, he hesitated to continue. "And then?" Serafina asked. There was nothing special about the rest. He had been overwhelmed by desire, just like any other cliché story, indulging while wanting to escape. Vivian said she wanted to do it properly one last time, and then she'd go back to London. He had convinced his hypocritical self that it would be the final time, and then everything would return to normal. Serafina didn't say anything. She was calm throughout. But it was this very calmness that sent a chill through Ethan. When he found out she'd become Aliner's adopted daughter to cut ties with him, he was angry, but he didn't believe she was that resolute. When she screamed that he was repulsive in the garage, he was hurt, but he wasn't hopeless. But now, looking at Serafina's empty eyes, Ethan was swallowed by darkness. She had withdrawn every ounce of emotion. She simply didn't care anymore. "Go back to the city tomorrow," Serafina told him. "Who do you want to win, me or Julian?" Ethan asked from behind her. "That's between the two of you. It has nothing to do with me," Serafina said, annoyed. Why did they both ask her the same thing? "Sira, Julian and I are natural enemies," Ethan said, his voice low. "When I found out about him at 18, my entire sense of family and security became a lie. I could never trust my father again, and my mother became a hysterical woman. My family was destroyed. Julian doesn't want to run the company, he wants to destroy it. I won't let that happen. Sira, don't fall for him." As he said the last part, Ethan had to grit his teeth to keep his voice from shaking. Serafina thought Ethan would leave the next day, but he stayed on the island for the entire day. Knowing she didn't want him near, he kept his distance, just watching her from afar. On the third day, Ethan went surfing. He wasn't very good at it. Serafina watched him struggle with the waves, constantly falling off the board. But he seemed to love it, spending all day in the water. The tattoo on Ethan's back was gone, replaced by a long, jagged scar that was even more gruesome than Serafina's. On the fourth day, Ethan set off fireworks on the beach. The fireworks went on for a long time, with various themes. Only Serafina understood them. They were the fireworks Ethan had set off for her on every one of her birthdays when they were together. Then he set off more, themes she hadn't seen. Ethan was probably setting off all the fireworks he'd never get to show her in the future. In the early hours of the morning, Serafina woke up feeling stifled. Unable to sleep, she changed and went for a run along the shore. The sky seemed darker than usual today. Even at 5 in the morning, the horizon was a muddy gray, with no sign of the sun. The horizon seemed to rumble with the sound of distant drums. Serafina suddenly realized something was wrong. She turned and sprinted for higher ground. But the tide came in too fast, a massive surge that swept away everything in its path. The roar of the wind and water was deafening. In the chaos, Serafina saw a figure running against the wind toward her. "Sira, take my hand," Ethan shouted as he reached her. Neither could stand firm as the waves dragged them toward the deep water. Ethan gripped Serafina's hand with everything he had. They managed to scramble up and run inland. Just as they were reaching safety, a tree snapped by the waves came crashing down. Ethan threw himself over Serafina to shield her. Serafina heard a dull thud, and Ethan's body went rigid for a moment before he continued to drag her forward. Once they reached a safe elevation, Serafina finally breathed a sigh of relief. Ethan, however, collapsed without a word. Only then did Serafina see that a branch had impaled his shoulder. He was covered in blood. The storm lasted for a day and a night. The island had no medical facilities, and no boats could get in or out. Serafina knocked on every door, doing everything she could to stop Ethan's bleeding. She eventually stopped the bleeding, but there was nothing more she could do. They could only wait. Ethan woke up for a brief period. The pain had turned him as white as a sheet, and he was shivering uncontrollably. Serafina was shivering too. "Sira, don't be afraid." Ethan smiled at her, reaching out with his good hand to touch her head. In that moment, Serafina was transported back to that night in the village 10 years ago. She bit her lip and turned her head away. The storm finally broke the following morning. Transportation and communication were restored. Ethan's people called immediately and sent a boat to fetch him. "Sira, please come with me," he begged again. "Come back even just as my sister. I don't expect you to forgive me. Just let me know you're in the same city as me." Serafina was silent for a long time. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing a long scar on her arm. "I used to wonder what kind of pain would drive someone to hurt their own body. Then I found out. Ethan, I don't want to be that sad ever again." Ethan felt a crushing blow to his heart. He had lived through that darkness. How could he let his Sira go through it too? He had been such a fool. A tear fell onto Serafina's skin. Ethan quickly pulled her sleeve back down and looked away. "I understand. Sira, you have to take care of yourself." Back in the city, Ethan, surrounded by his staff, strode into the boardroom. The noisy room went silent for a moment. The meeting lasted 4 hours, and by the end, the arguments were so loud they could be heard from down the hall. Elinor stood up and declared the meeting adjourned until the next day. Once everyone was gone, Elinor walked up to Ethan and slapped him across the face. Ethan turned his head, and Elinor's hand missed. She hammered her fists against his chest, her eyes red. "Do you want to kill me? You left the city and vanished for an entire week." Ethan's wound reopened, and he let out a muffled groan. Elinor realized something was wrong. She pulled his shirt open and saw the blood-soaked bandages. Her eyes filled with tears. "How did this happen? Was it Serafina? I should never have brought her home. She's an ungrateful wretch." "Mother, if you hadn't brought her home, she wouldn't have been able to study, but I might have lost my life. It was a fair trade," Ethan said calmly. "So, don't blame her. Besides, you only brought her home to spite my father because he had a child with someone else. You wanted to give him a hard time, but it turned out he didn't care." Elinor was speechless. After a long moment, she exhaled. "I won't let him or that bastard of his get what they want. He won't get a single dime of sterling money. Ethan, Arthur didn't just leave a will for that boy, he left him people. Someone is helping him. You need to understand that if he takes over, neither I nor our supporters will have a future." Every day, a single frangipani flower appeared on Serafina's windowsill. Frangipanis were everywhere on the island, but they didn't just fall onto a windowsill by accident every single day. It had started the day Julian left. A few times, Serafina had woken up early and seen a little girl through the curtains. The girl would quietly place the flower and then sneak away. In the days after Ethan left, the girl came even more often, visiting every morning and evening. In the evening, she would stand on her tiptoes to peek into the house. Serafina called Julian. He answered after a moment, his voice sounding lazy. "Calling me in the middle of the night? Do you miss me? You don't need to send someone to check on me every day. I'm alive and well." Serafina knew Julian's obsession. He was haunted by his inability to save his mother. Julian gave a short laugh. He didn't speak, but he didn't hang up either. Just as Serafina was about to end the call, Julian said, "I didn't expect Ethan to track you down on the island at a time like this. I was careless." Serafina gave a vague response. There wasn't much to say. I heard he got hurt. It seems you mean more to him than I thought. Fina, what if I used you to blackmail him? What do you think he'd do? Julian's tone was teasing, somewhere between a joke and a threat. Serafina said nothing. After a long time, Julian sighed. Stay on the island, don't go anywhere. No matter who tells you to come back to the city, don't listen. There's a document in my study drawer. It's been notarized. If I'm not back in 2 or 3 months, sign your name. The island will be yours. He added with a smile, I don't have any relatives to give it to anyway. Does it have to be this dramatic? Serafina asked. Fina, when a ship is at sea in good weather, the captain can control it. But when a storm hits, the ship is at the mercy of the wind and waves. Whether it hits a reef or is washed back to shore is out of the captain's hands. After that day, the little girl continued to bring flowers and sometimes fresh fruit. She didn't hide anymore. If she saw Serafina on the balcony, she would give her a sweet smile. This went on for a month. Then, one morning, there was no flower and no girl. It wasn't until evening that the little girl arrived, crying. Her English wasn't good, but between her words and gestures, Serafina understood that she'd heard her parents talking about Julian. Something terrible had happened, and he might die. Serafina's heart skipped a beat. She went inside to call him, but the phone went unanswered. She waited until nightfall when the phone finally rang back. She answered quickly, but a strange male voice spoke. Miss Thorne, Mr. Rivers was in a car accident. He's in surgery. The situation is critical. Could you come and see him? Serafina went to hang up, but the man said, I was assigned by Mr. Sterling SR to help Mr. Rivers. We did discuss using you as leverage against the other side, but Mr. Rivers refused. This is a personal request from me. I'm afraid that it might be good to have someone he knows by his side. Serafina arrived at the international airport 2 days later. Someone was waiting for her. As the car drove into the city center, a massive screen was broadcasting a wedding. Serafina looked out the window. A bride in a pure white gown threw her bouquet and turned. Under her white veil, Vivian Ashford's radiant face filled the screen. Standing behind her, Ethan Sterling in a black suit gave a cold look toward the camera. When they arrived at the hospital, Serafina was terrified she'd find Julian on a ventilator, clinging to life. Instead, Julian was lying in bed. He was pale, but he was awake and breathing on his own. He sighed when he saw her. I told you not to come back. Why are you so easy to fool? You're brilliant at school, but you have no common sense. Serafina. She turned to leave, but the man who brought her blocked her path. The situation was a bit exaggerated over the phone, but the surgery lasted 6 hours, and he was out for a day. The doctors almost issued a critical condition notice. Serafina turned back. Julian's eyes met hers, and then he looked away. Serafina realized that surgery had made him even more difficult. She sat down in the chair by the bed. She saw the tubes and the blood transfusion. He was seriously injured. I heard it was a car accident, Serafina asked. Julian grunted. Serafina didn't dare ask if it was an accident or something else. Julian guessed what she was thinking. It might not have been him. It could have been an accident, or it could have been one of his people getting impatient. I sent Alina to prison, and her side is desperate. The amount of information in that one sentence was staggering. Serafina felt a chill in her palms. Julian didn't stop there. To get his mother out, Ethan married Vivian Ashford. Vivian's uncle has the will, and he wouldn't pick a side without a guarantee. Julian watched Serafina's reaction, but she only gave a faint nod. I saw the wedding broadcast in the city. You've heard the news, you've seen the face. Now go back to the island. Julian thought she had come back because Ethan got married. Seeing him acting like he was closing his doors to her, Serafina thought he was being overly dramatic. You took care of me for a month when I was sick. I'm returning the favor, Serafina said firmly. She pushed her suitcase into the closet. That night, Julian woke up in pain. He saw Serafina asleep at his bedside. She hadn't intended to sleep. She was still holding a book, and her head was resting on it. The lights were off, but moonlight filtered through the curtains, illuminating her face. Julian remembered how pale and broken she'd looked after leaving the Sterling house. He was proud that he'd taken such good care of her. The thought made something stir in Julian's heart. He watched her intently, and for a moment, the pain from his surgery seemed to fade. Julian had always hated romantic fools, and he never thought he was capable of real love. But when everyone had pressured him to use Serafina as leverage against Ethan, he had refused. When he woke up from surgery and they told him Serafina was coming, he had yelled at them, but secretly, he had been full of hope. Julian realized he had fallen for her, and he wasn't sure he wanted to get back up. The next morning, Julian was woken by a weight on him. Serafina had slumped over in her sleep. Her head was resting on his thigh, and her hand was resting over the blanket, right on a part of him that was particularly active in the morning. Julian wanted to move, but his body was currently useless. As he tried to shift his legs slightly, Serafina rubbed her eyes and sat up. Still half asleep, she looked at him. "Do you need water or the bathroom? I'll help you up." She pulled back the blanket. Then she froze for 3 seconds. The hospital gown was loose, but the tent was unmistakable. Serafina was wide awake now. She quickly threw the blanket back over him. I didn't know. I mean, it's morning, but you just had surgery," she stammered. Julian gritted his teeth and closed his eyes. "As long as I'm alive, that's going to happen in the morning. Do you need the bathroom?" "I'll help you," Serafina tried to stay calm. "Call the nurse." "Oh," Serafina reached for the call button, relieved. Julian grabbed her hand. "At least wait until it goes down. I have some dignity, you know." The wedding of Ethan Sterling and Vivian Ashford was the talk of the town. Even in the hospital, Serafina couldn't escape the gossip. One day, she went to buy some wontons for Julian from a shop near the university. As she got into the elevator, she heard the nurses behind her chatting. It's the ultimate high society marriage. We all know the Sterling family, but what about the Ashford girl? The Ashfords aren't on that level, but I heard Ethan has been in love with her for years. She went abroad for school, and he waited all that time for her to come back. He really loves her. She almost cried during the ring exchange, and he whispered something to comfort her. He was so gentle, I almost cried watching it. The nurses laughed, talking about how lucky Vivian was, and got off on different floors. As the elevator reached the top floor, only 2 people were left. Serafina didn't look up, replying to a message from Julian asking where she was. When the elevator chimed and Serafina moved to leave, the person standing in the corner took off their sunglasses. "Sera," Serafina froze. Ethan's eyes had been glued to Serafina from the moment she entered the elevator. He'd watched her walk in with her head down, watched her press the button, watched her tuck a stray hair behind her ear. He felt like a traveler in the desert staring at an oasis. When she was with him, he had taken everything for granted. Now, even a glance was a luxury. On the island, he hadn't dared to look at her openly. He had restrained himself, afraid of her disgust. When he heard she was back, he knew he shouldn't come, but he couldn't help himself. He only wanted to see her from afar, but he couldn't stop himself from calling her name. Serafina turned. Ethan had dark circles under his eyes and looked thinner. Her phone buzzed. She answered, and Julian's lazy voice came through. "If you take any longer, I'll think you're lost. I'm coming to find you. You're a patient. Don't go anywhere." Serafina frowned, looked away from Ethan, and stepped out of the elevator. She walked quickly, but she heard Ethan's footsteps behind her. A nurse rounded the corner and bumped into her. Serafina almost dropped the food, but a hand reached out to steady her. The nurse apologized and left, but Ethan didn't let go of her arm. Serafina tried to pull away, but Ethan held firm. Just as she was about to speak, "Mr. Sterling," Julian appeared around the corner in his wheelchair, his tone sharp. His eyes were fixed on Ethan's hand on Serafina's arm. Ethan's expression was equally cold as he looked at Julian. Julian suddenly smirked. "Happy wedding." Ethan stared at him for 3 seconds, then let go. Ethan and Julian spoke alone in the hospital room for about 10 minutes. Over the next month, their people were in constant contact. Negotiations went on for a dozen rounds. Ethan didn't come to the hospital again. Julian was discharged after a month. The day he left, Elinor was released from prison. The following day, the Sterlings announced Arthur's death and the reading of the will. The will publicly acknowledged Julian as Arthur's second son. He was granted a massive share of the company, second only to Ethan. With that, the Sterling Group appeared to have achieved a peaceful transition. A week later, just as Serafina was planning to leave the city, she received a call from Elinor inviting her to a family gathering. "You are my adopted daughter on paper. You should at least show some respect." Serafina hesitated but agreed. She felt she still owed Alina something. Why should that bastard get any shares? We did so much, even sacrificed your marriage, and you give in now? I'd rather have stayed in prison than have you make that trade, Alina was screaming at home. The thought of Ethan giving away shares made her furious. As long as you're okay, we can handle the rest later. Ethan patiently tried to calm her. Mother, you're my only family left. Alina countered, you have other family. Serafina is my daughter, which makes her your sister. I've invited her to the party tomorrow. She's eaten sterling food for years. It's time she showed some gratitude. Ethan's face darkened. Sierra has nothing to do with any of this. Leave her out of it. Alina sneered. She's with that bastard now. It's infuriating. Tell her tomorrow that if she doesn't want to be an ungrateful wretch, she needs to report back on everything they're doing. Ethan was silent. He wouldn't let Serafina get involved, but he was desperately looking forward to seeing her. The next day, Serafina arrived. Vivian was waiting at the door. With her red lips and striking looks, she was as arrogant as ever. Sierra is here. It's a shame you didn't make it to our wedding, Vivian said, taking Serafina's hand in an affectionately tight grip. Serafina felt like a cold snake was coiling around her. She pulled her hand away. Actually, you should call me sister-in-law, Vivian said with a smirk. Let me hear it. Ethan walked out, his eyes flashing a warning. Vivian scoffed. She's mother's daughter and your sister. What's the problem with her calling me sister-in-law? The guests were starting to notice the scene. Fina is here as my fiancé. A hand rested on Serafina's shoulder. Julian walked up and pulled her close. He gave Ethan and Vivian a dismissive look. I haven't even acknowledged him as a brother. Why should she call her anything? This gala was the first public event since Arthur's death and the restructuring of the company. Julian, as the new Sterling, was the center of attention. He clearly had no intention of playing the part of a harmonious brother. He took Serafina's hand and led her inside. Under the gaze of the crowd, Ethan forced himself not to look at Serafina's back. Vivian smiled thinly. Does it hurt? The woman you call out for in your sleep is being intimate with your worst enemy. Fiancé, do you think she thinks of you when she's with him? Vivian Ashford, the veins on Ethan's hand bulged. He had to admit that last comment hit him where it hurt. He was on the verge of losing control in public. Halfway through the party, Serafina went to the restroom. A moment later, Vivian followed her in and locked the door. A year later, and here we are again. I underestimated you, Serafina. You lost Ethan and immediately hooked Julian. You charity types are really good at climbing the ladder. Serafina washed her hands, not wanting to deal with her. She tried to open the door, but Vivian blocked her way. She lit a cigarette and leaned in. Did you see our wedding? She laughed. Ethan is even more of a man now that we're married. We try something new every night. Serafina shoved her aside. If you love sharing your bedroom stories so much, why don't you start a live stream? Vivian hit the door, her eyes cold. Now that you have someone backing you, you've grown a spine. Serafina went back to the hall, still shaking. Every interaction with Vivian left her feeling dirty. She went to the bar and took a glass of wine, but someone took it from her hand. Don't drink on an empty stomach, your stomach will hurt. Ethan stared at her, his brow furrowed. Serafina was frustrated. She regretted coming. First Vivian, now Ethan. She looked around for Alina, wanting to ask what she wanted and then leave. Ethan thought she was looking for Julian and felt a pang of jealousy. Julian is busy with some executives. He's not in the hall right now. Seeing Serafina remain silent, Ethan looked dejected. He gave a bitter smile. I won't bother you, Sierra. Don't be unhappy. After Ethan left, Serafina went to the terrace for some fresh air. A servant approached her. Miss Thorne, Madame Alina would like to see you. The servant led her to the third floor, to a room at the end of the hall, and opened the door. Serafina walked in and called out, Mother? The lights suddenly went out. She heard the door lock behind her, and someone approached her in the darkness. The person pressed against Serafina, the smell of cheap alcohol hitting her face. Help! Serafina's mouth was covered. A hand roughly tore at her blouse and reached for her lower body. Serafina fought back with everything she had, kicking the man hard. The man stumbled back. Furious, he grabbed Serafina's hair and dragged her onto the bed. Serafina hit her head on the headboard and saw stars. The man unbuckled his belt and lunged. Serafina bit down hard on his shoulder. He grunted in pain but remained silent. Serafina struggled, but the man slapped her across the face and pinned her down. She realized this man wasn't acting out of drunken lust. He seemed to be completing a job. Her phone, lying by the door, began to vibrate. The man hesitated and went to pick it up. While his back was turned, Serafina grabbed a vase from the foyer and smashed it over his head. The vase shattered and the man was dazed. Serafina grabbed the phone. It was Julian. She answered, her voice trembling. "Julian, I'm on the 3rd floor, help me." A hand gripped her arm painfully. The man twisted her arm and took the phone, hanging up. He seemed to be panicking now. He tried to tear at her dress again, but kept looking nervously at the door. Noise erupted from the hallway. "Fina Serafina Thorn," Julian's voice echoed. The man covered Serafina's mouth, but she slammed her head against the door to make noise. Realizing he was caught, the man abandoned her and vaulted out the balcony window. Serafina's legs gave out, and she collapsed on the floor. Julian burst in and flipped on the lights. When he saw her, he was consumed by rage and pain. He saw the swelling on her face and the bruises on her shoulders. He wrapped his coat around her. Serafina managed to tell him what happened. Despite the shock, she was thinking clearly. The man had never let her see his face and hadn't spoken. He knew who she was and was afraid of the consequences. This wasn't a random attack. Someone had hired him. Ethan arrived shortly after with a leaner. Ethan pushed past everyone to get to her, but Julian blocked him. Julian's face was dark with cold fury. "When I find out who did this, I won't be merciful. I don't care about the shares. I can give them all back if it means that person dies." Elena yelled, "What does that mean? Are you accusing me? I don't use such low-class methods." Ethan ordered his people to check the security footage and the guest list. He looked at Serafina. Again, she was hiding behind Julian, her face bruised. It hurt him deeply. He told Julian, "Take her home and have her checked for injuries. I'll handle things here." Late that night, Ethan and Vivian were being driven back to their villa. Ethan hadn't said a word. Vivian tried to talk to him several times, but he didn't even acknowledge her. Back in the bedroom, Vivian showered and came out in a thin negligee. Ethan was sitting on the sofa, the ashtray full of cigarette butts. Vivian walked over and sat across his lap. She grabbed his hand and placed it on her body. Ethan didn't move, just exhaled a cloud of smoke. Vivian leaned in and whispered in his ear, "I heard Serafina was almost." Ethan suddenly shoved her off his lap. She fell to the floor, hitting her head on the coffee table. She didn't get angry, she just laughed. "How long are you going to be like this, Ethan? You only react when someone mentions Serafina. You're sick." Ethan's eyes were bloodshot. He grabbed Vivian, dragged her to the window, and pushed her against the sill. Vivian was hanging halfway out. She screamed as her long hair blew in the wind. "You arranged that man today," Ethan said coldly. It wasn't a question. Vivian didn't deny it. She looked up and shouted, "Yes, I did. You want her to be your white moonlight? Let's see how she feels after she's been dragged through the mud." Vivian was pushed further back, Ethan's hand tightening on her throat. His eyes were filled with rage and disgust. For a moment, Vivian truly believed he was going to kill her. "Ethan, I'm pregnant," Vivian laughed. Ethan froze. His expression slowly shifted from rage to cold indifference. He turned away. Vivian climbed back in, still smiling. "We're having a child. It happened the day before the wedding." "I don't want the child," Ethan said, his voice as cold as ice. "A child conceived with alcohol and drugs. With parents who have no love, don't be cruel. People like us shouldn't have children." As Ethan walked away, Vivian's smile crumbled. "I always get what I want. If you don't want it, I'll make sure it happens. Do you hate me? Do you want to leave me? With a child that shares your blood, you'll have to look at me forever." Julian took Serafina to the hospital to have her bruises treated. By the time they got back, it was very late. As they entered the house, Serafina was stunned. The hall was filled with roses, and balloons with her name were on the walls. The table was set with candles. She turned to Julian. Julian gave a bittersweet smile. "I didn't think things would end that way at the party. I was going to. But now it seems inappropriate." He helped her inside, and they sat at opposite ends of the table. Serafina wanted to say something, but Julian spoke first. "That was the second time I told everyone you were my fiancé. I don't want it to just be a title." Serafina bit her lip. Julian continued. "When Ethan came to the hospital, he offered to trade his shares for his mother's release. I just wanted Alina to spend the rest of her life in prison. I don't care about the Sterling Group. Since my mother died when I was 15, I haven't cared about anything. I just wanted revenge to make Alina suffer and destroy the Sterlings. But then, I realized there was someone I cared about. With her, the world didn't seem so ugly. I wanted to give myself a chance for a different kind of life. Fina, I bought a ring that's even bigger than the $12 million one. Do you want to try it? I'm sure it fits better. Julian looked uncharacteristically nervous. He walked over to her and pulled out a ring box. Should I kneel now? Serafina stopped him. Julian seemed to know what was coming, but he forced a smile. The atmosphere is all wrong today. It's my fault. You're tired, you should go rest. Julian, it's not going to happen, Serafina said. I'm sorry. Julian looked dejected. After a moment, he asked, Is it because of Ethan? Serafina was silent for a long time. The 10 years I spent with Ethan make up nearly half my life. He was my protector, my brother, my family, then my boyfriend, my fiancé, and finally, the one who betrayed me. Whether I like it or not, those years have left a deep mark on me. They are a part of who I am. I used to wonder if I hated him, but I realized I don't. He gave me more love than hate. But do I still love him? When I saw his wedding on that screen, I felt nothing. My love for him is gone. I just want to erase everything he left behind. A glimmer of hope appeared in Julian's eyes. Fina, if you need time, I can wait. Serafina shook her head and looked Julian in the eye. Whether you acknowledge it or not, you and he are half-brothers. You share the same blood. Julian, you might not notice, but you look very much like him. When I look at you, I will always be reminded of him. The ring box slipped from Julian's hand and rolled across the floor. Julian had never felt so powerless. But Serafina wasn't done. She seemed determined to extinguish every last spark of hope. You took me abroad, you cared for me in the hospital, you helped me move on. I'm grateful. So grateful that a simple thank you feels too small. Those days were so hard for me. Everything was gray. I only heard your voice. You pulled me out. Do you know who I thought of? Julian gave a bitter smile. I thought of my mother. I was afraid you'd be like her, but you're stronger. After she left me like that, I always felt a weight on my heart. On the day you were discharged, I felt it lift. So, Fina, don't feel you owe me. I did it because I wanted to. I've booked a flight for Wednesday. I'm going back to the island to get some things. I've been accepted to a PhD program, and after that, I won't be going back to the island. Now that everything was out in the open, Serafina stood up to go to her room. Julian grabbed her wrist. Fina, that night. The night of my birthday. Were you asleep? Serafina's heart skipped a beat. That night, the night she thought they'd both decided to forget. That night, after Julian had shared his secrets, he'd fallen into a drunken sleep. Serafina, also a bit tipsy, had fallen asleep in a chair. In the early morning light, a kiss as light as a feather had landed on her lips. She had opened her eyes slightly to see the man's handsome profile in the dim light. She had held her breath and closed her eyes again. The kiss had lingered for a long time before he pulled away. You were awake, weren't you? Julian asked. He wanted to know if, for that one moment, she'd felt something for him. Yes, in that moment. Did you think of him? Julian asked through gritted teeth. No, it was you. Serafina looked at him. I did feel something for you, Julian, but I don't know if that feeling was just a result of my vulnerability and dependence at the time. I don't want another relationship that starts with someone saving me. It's too heavy. I won't let myself fall into that cycle again. The light in Julian's eyes was gone. Serafina had been completely honest with him, and in doing so, she had left him with nothing. The next day, Serafina went to see Professor Miller, but she found out he'd been hospitalized for high blood pressure. She bought some fruit and went to visit him. A year later, the professor's anger had faded. He was happy to hear Serafina was applying for a PhD and encouraged her. As she left the room, Serafina felt a rare sense of lightness. But that feeling didn't last until she reached the exit. Vivian Ashford was coming out of the maternity ward, holding an ultrasound. She walked up to Serafina, her hand on her belly. I'm pregnant. Ethan is so happy he's going to be a father. He's so happy that Vivian leaned in. Even though he knows I arranged that man at the party, he doesn't even want to blame me. Serafina's breathing quickened. That familiar feeling of a snake coiling around her was back. She stepped away and turned to leave. Suddenly, a man came up behind Vivian and shoved her hard. Vivian fell violently down the stairs. Vivian was rushed into surgery. Half an hour later, the doctor announced she'd suffered a miscarriage and needed further treatment. Ethan arrived and signed the consent forms. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize what was happening. I didn't catch her," Serafina said. Ethan frowned. "It has nothing to do with you. I saw the security footage. We found the man who did it. He's mentally ill. His family didn't keep an eye on him." Serafina saw how bad Ethan looked. Remembering what Vivian said about him being happy about the baby, she said, You can have children in the future." Ethan shook his head but didn't say anything. The procedure was quick. 10 minutes later, the surgery room doors opened. Serafina didn't want to see Vivian, but Vivian suddenly lunged from her bed and threw herself at Serafina, her hands grabbing for her throat. "It was you did this on purpose. You wanted to hurt me, Serafina. You're jealous of me." Ethan stepped in to pull her away. "It was an accident." Vivian was pale, staring at Ethan. "It was you. You and she were in it together. You didn't want the child, so you arranged for someone to do this. The man is mentally ill. It was an accident. If I didn't want a child, I wouldn't have done it this way." Ethan tried to explain. "I don't believe you," Vivian screamed. "A mental patient." "That's a lie. It was Serafina. She hates me." She tried to attack Serafina again, but Ethan held her. As she struggled, blood began to soak her hospital gown. Serafina left the hospital. The taxi moved slowly through the city center. She looked through the window at the buildings, the streets, and the people. Everything felt like a movie in slow motion. She remembered how happy she'd been to come to the city. She had loved everything about it. Now, everything she'd cared for was gone. She wanted to leave as soon as possible, to leave this cold place for somewhere warm. Serafina packed her bags. Julian entered the room. "What time is your flight tomorrow?" 10 in the morning. "I'll take you." "No thanks. I know you're busy. I've already booked a car." "I can spare a morning, or is it?" Julian gave a forced, charming smile. "Now that I've been rejected, we can't even be friends. Your room on the island is yours. You can visit whenever you like." Serafina gave a faint smile and shook her head. They both knew the truth. If it hadn't been for that kiss, they might have been able to pretend, but now it was impossible. Julian watched her for a long time. Finally, he said, "Goodbye, Fina. Take care of yourself." In the middle of the night, Serafina's phone rang. She answered after the first ring. She knew this call was coming. There was a long silence before Ethan's raspy voice came through. "Sera, yes, are you really leaving?" "Yes, I've dealt with the man from the gala. The person who hired him was Vivian." Serafina wasn't surprised. "It's better that you leave. The city isn't what it used to be. Go find somewhere better." "Ethan," Serafina said, using the name she used to call him. Tears filled Ethan's eyes. In that moment, he desperately wanted to go back to when they were young and supported each other. "I was wrong, Sera." "I'm so sorry," Ethan choked out. "Okay, I forgive you. Let's both move forward," Serafina said softly. "Don't come to see me off tomorrow. I don't want people watching me leave." "Okay." Serafina hung up. The next day was foggy. Serafina took a car to the airport. She stopped at a coffee shop near the terminal to get a drink. As she walked out, she checked her flight status on her phone. As she crossed the street toward the airport, a red Ferrari suddenly accelerated toward her. Serafina looked up in horror. Behind the windshield was Vivian Ashford, her face twisted with hatred, flooring the gas pedal and staring right at her. Serafina had no time to move. Suddenly, a black sedan lunged from the side, crashing into the Ferrari. The impact was deafening. The Ferrari was slammed into the barrier, and both cars tumbled away. In the moment she saw the black car, Serafina's eyes filled with tears, and she lost her voice. That evening, the news reported a major accident near the airport. 2 luxury cars had collided at high speed. The cause was unknown. Rumor had it that the victims were the heir to the Sterling Group and his new wife. By the time rescuers arrived, the Ferrari was on fire. Both occupants died at the scene. The end.